Welcome back to the channel. These stories are meant for late nights, quiet rooms, and headphones on. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment telling me where you're listening from tonight. Now, let's begin the first story. The first time I saw the house, it felt less like discovering a place and more like remembering one. I stood at the end of a gravel road that shouldn't have existed on any map. My car idled behind me, engine ticking softly, the only sound in a countryside that seemed to be holding its breath. The late afternoon sky was the color of bruised stone. Clouds hung low, unmoving. Not even the grass swayed. No wind, no birds, no insects, just stillness. And the house. It was a farmhouse, old and proud in a tired way. 2 stories, a wide porch, paint peeling like shedding skin, windows dark, not broken, just waiting. Ivy climbed its walls in twisting lines that reminded me of veins under translucent flesh. The structure didn't look abandoned, it looked paused, as if someone had just stepped out for a moment. My name is Aaron Wild. I'm not the kind of person who believes in fate or ghosts or omens. I buy things logically. I plan, I calculate. But when I saw that house online, something had pulled me in before reason could intervene. The listing had been strange. No photos inside, no realtor name, just one exterior picture and a line of text. Quiet countryside home, ideal for reflection. The price was impossibly low, so low that I assumed structural issues or legal problems, but curiosity mixed with exhaustion had pushed me forward. I wired the payment, signed documents digitally, received a single key in the mail inside a plain envelope with no return address. I didn't even tour the place beforehand. I told myself I wanted solitude, a break from city noise, from endless emails, from a life that felt like it was slipping past me while I watched from behind glass. I wanted stillness. I got it. I just didn't understand what kind. The porch boards creaked beneath my weight as I approached the front door. The sound echoed louder than it should have in the empty air. My pulse matched the rhythm, fast, uneven. I slid the key into the lock. It turned easily. No resistance, no rust, no stiffness. The door swung inward by itself. Not forcefully, not suddenly, just welcoming. Cool air spilled out, carrying the scent of old wood, dust, and something faintly metallic, like pennies rubbed together. I stepped inside. The door closed behind me with a soft click. I didn't touch it. The interior was dim, lit only by the gray light filtering through thin curtains. The entryway opened into a large living room with worn furniture covered in sheets. A staircase climbed upward, disappearing into shadow. The floors were hardwood, dark and polished by time. It should have felt abandoned. Instead, it felt occupied. Not by people, by attention. I set my bags down and told myself it was nerves. New place, remote area. Silence amplifies imagination. I explored room by room. Kitchen, dining room, study, guest bedroom. Everything coated in a thin layer of dust. But no cobwebs, no rodent droppings. No signs of neglect beyond time's gentle hand. It was as if someone had cleaned carefully and then simply stopped existing. In the study, I noticed something odd. A single chair pulled out from the desk, as if someone had just stood up. I told myself it meant nothing, but I pushed it in anyway. By evening, clouds swallowed the last daylight. The house grew darker, shadows lengthening along hallways like stretching fingers. I unpacked essentials in the upstairs bedroom. The mattress was firm, clean, surprisingly comfortable. Fresh sheets waited, folded neatly at the foot of the bed. That should have bothered me more. Who would put them there? But fatigue won. I told myself the previous owner had left them. I ate a simple meal, turned on a lamp. The bulb flickered once, then steadied. I sat on the bed and listened. That's when I noticed the silence. Not normal quiet. No refrigerator hum, no pipes, no wind against windows, no distant cars, no crickets, no house settling. Nothing. I could hear my own breathing too clearly. My heartbeat drummed in my ears. Even the sound of my shirt brushing my skin felt loud. The silence wasn't absence of sound. It was something else, like sound had been absorbed, swallowed. I switched off the lamp. Darkness filled the room instantly, thick and velvety. Then I heard it. A creak. Far away, low in the house. Then another. Not random, not wandering. Measured. Slow. Approaching. I told myself it was old wood. Houses settle, temperature changes, logical explanations. Still, I turned the lamp back on. The light cast sharp shadows along the walls. Too sharp. The corners of the room looked deeper than they should have. The closet door seemed slightly open. I knew I had closed it earlier. I walked over and shut it firmly. When I turned back, the lamp flickered again. 1 beat, 2, then stable. Sleep didn't come easily. Every time I drifted towards it, a feeling pulled me back, like someone was watching, not from the room, from the house itself. Eventually, exhaustion dragged me under. I dreamt I was standing in the living room. The house was darker, older, more decayed. Wallpaper peeled like dead skin. The air smelled of damp earth. Something pulsed beneath the floorboards, a slow, rhythmic thump, like a buried heart. Then I heard my name. Not spoken, breathed. Aaron. I turned towards the staircase. At the top step stood a woman. I couldn't see her face, only long hair hanging forward, a dress that blended into shadow. She tilted her head. The house pulsed once, hard. I woke, gasping. Morning light felt wrong in the house. It wasn't warm, it was pale, flat, as if the sun didn't quite reach this place. I made coffee. The machine worked. The sound of brewing was the first normal noise I had heard. I clung to it. Cup in hand, I explored again. This time, I noticed the photographs. They lined the hallway upstairs, dozens of framed pictures. I hadn't noticed them last night. Every photo showed the same house, same porch, same living room, same staircase. Different people, men, women, children, families, couples, all smiling in front of the house. But in each photograph, the windows behind them were dark. And in some, if I looked closely, there were shapes inside, vague silhouettes, pressed close to the glass, watching. I moved on quickly, told myself they were previous owners, but at the end of the hallway, I froze. A single frame hung slightly crooked. Inside was a photograph of me, standing on the gravel road, looking at the house, taken from behind. I had no memory of that picture. My hands shook as I lifted the frame off the wall. On the back, written in faded ink, "Welcome home, Aaron." I dropped the frame. The glass didn't break. It didn't even crack. It landed on the floor and landed upright, perfectly balanced, as if placed carefully. That afternoon, I tried to leave. I packed my bag, grabbed my car keys, walked down the porch steps. The gravel road stretched ahead. I got in my car, started the engine, drove forward. 5 minutes passed, 10. Then I saw the house again, ahead of me, at the end of the same gravel road. I turned around, drove the opposite direction. The same thing happened. The house always waiting, always ahead, like the world beyond its property folded back towards it. I stopped the car, turned off the engine, sat in silence. Then from inside the house, I heard it again. The slow creaking, measured, intentional, as if it knew I was coming back. By nightfall, I was inside again, because there was nowhere else to go. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the edge of the bed with the lamp on, watching shadows stretch and contract along the walls. The house made no settling noises. No wind pressed against the windows, no pipes rattled. Nothing. Just that oppressive silence. And beneath it, so faint I thought I imagined it at first, a rhythm. A slow, deep thudding, like a heartbeat. Not mine, from below the floor. When morning came, it didn't feel like relief. It felt like permission, as if the house had allowed daylight back in only because it wanted me to see what came next. I forced myself to eat. I forced myself to shower. I forced myself to behave like a rational human being who had not just discovered a photograph of himself taken before he arrived. Denial is a powerful survival instinct. By noon, I decided to search the house thoroughly. If I was trapped here, then I needed answers. Some clue, some history, something grounded in reality. The study became my starting point. The desk drawers were empty except for a single brass key, different from the front door key. Old, heavy, cold to the touch. Attached to it was a small wooden tag carved with a symbol, a spiral. The same spiral that ivy traced on the exterior walls. I tried every locked door in the house. Only one fit. At the end of the upstairs hallway, behind a wardrobe I hadn't moved before, was a door nearly flush with the wall. It had no visible handle, just a small keyhole. The key slid in smoothly. When I turned it, the entire wall shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a slow, soft movement as a hidden door opened inward. Cold air spilled out, carrying the scent of damp earth and something older, something stale, something wrong. A narrow staircase descended into darkness. I told myself I wouldn't go down there. I told myself that any sensible person would turn around, barricade the door, and wait for daylight or something. But the truth was simple. The house had already decided I belonged to it. And deep down, I knew running wouldn't save me. So I stepped onto the first stair, then the second, then the third. The door behind me closed silently on its own. The stairs ended in a small underground room. Stone walls, dirt floor, a single bare bulb hanging from a wire that led into the ceiling, though I knew there was no electricity running to this place. Yet the bulb glowed. In the center of the room stood a table. On it lay a thick leather journal. I approached slowly. My footsteps made no sound on the dirt floor, not even the scrape of my shoes. I opened the journal. The handwriting inside was neat, careful, deliberate. The first entry read, "If you are reading this, the house has chosen you. I am sorry." The journal belonged to a man named Thomas Hale. Entry after entry described his arrival here, his discovery of the house, his inability to leave, the photographs, the heartbeat beneath the floors, the dreams. Every detail mirrored my experience, except his story didn't stop where mine had begun. Thomas wrote about the house feeding, not on flesh, on identity, on memory, on self. He described days vanishing, waking in rooms he didn't remember entering, finding objects moved, hearing his own voice whispering when he hadn't spoken. He described seeing himself in mirrors, smiling when he wasn't. And finally, he wrote about the truth. The house was not haunted. It was alive. A parasitic structure that lured people seeking solitude, people running from something, people worn thin, people easy to reshape. The house didn't kill, it replaced. The final entry was only 2 lines. "Tonight it finishes with me. If you read this, don't fight it. You'll only suffer longer." I dropped the journal. The heartbeat beneath the floor grew louder. The bulb overhead flickered. The air in the room thickened. And then I realized something horrifying. The sound wasn't below the floor. It was in the walls, in the ceiling, in the air, in me. My own pulse had begun to match it. I ran up the stairs. The hidden door opened before I reached it, as if anticipating me. I burst into the hallway, gasping, shaking. Every door along the corridor stood open now. All the rooms I had explored before were different. The furniture had shifted. The walls bulged slightly inward. The ceiling dipped. The space felt compressed, like the house was exhaling. In the photographs, every frame in the hallway had changed. They were all of me now. Dozens of pictures. Me in every room. Me standing in the yard. Me sleeping. Me staring at the staircase. Me looking directly at the camera with a smile I did not recognize. I backed away. The floor beneath me creaked. Not random creaking. Intentional. Responding. Tracking. That night, the dreams returned. Only this time, I couldn't wake up. I stood in the living room, but the house was decayed, breathing, pulsing like a living lung. Veins of ivy crawled inside the walls. The air tasted like copper. A figure waited at the base of the stairs. Tall, still, featureless. When it spoke, it used my voice. "You're tired, Aaron. Let go." I woke up on the living room floor. Sunlight streamed through the windows. Birds chirped outside. Wind rustled trees. Normal sounds. Normal world. For a moment, I thought it was over. Then I saw my reflection in the dark television screen. My eyes were darker. Not black, just deeper, like windows into a place with no light. I tried leaving again. This time, I didn't take the car. I walked. Down the gravel road, past the fence, past the trees. I walked until my legs burned, until my lungs screamed, until the sun began to set. And then, ahead of me, the house waited. Always ahead. Always waiting. Acceptance came slowly, like sinking into deep water. The house didn't want to harm me, not in its way. It wanted to preserve me, to keep me, to make me part of its structure, part of its memory, part of its eternity. I realized Thomas Hale wasn't dead. He was still here, in the walls, in the floors, in the heartbeat. And soon, so would I be. On the final night, I sat in the study and wrote my own journal. I described the house, the photos, the road, the truth. I left it on the desk. Then I took a single photograph of myself standing in the hallway. When the flash faded, I noticed the windows behind me, dark, and something pressed against the glass, smiling. I don't remember going to bed. I don't remember falling asleep, but I remember waking up in the walls, not physically, but as sensation, as awareness, as presence. I am the hush between sounds, the weight in the air, the heartbeat beneath the floor. And sometimes, when a new visitor arrives seeking solitude, seeking escape, seeking reflection, I whisper their names softly through the halls, welcoming them home. It was supposed to be a routine flight. I was on a late evening flight from Boston to Los Angeles, seated by the window, headphones in, trying to escape a week of relentless meetings and the endless noise of the city. I had expected nothing more than the usual hum of engines, the occasional rattle of a beverage cart, and the soft murmur of passengers settling in. But then, I saw him. He was sitting 3 rows ahead, across the aisle. His posture was unnerving, perfectly straight, hands folded neatly in his lap, head tilted slightly forward. His suit was dark, almost black, but impeccable. Too neat, too deliberate. He didn't glance at his phone, didn't look around, he just stared out the window. And his eyes, they were pale, not just light-colored, but near white, cloudy, and somehow distant. Eyes that didn't seem to register the world around him, eyes that didn't blink. I tried to shake it off, tried to convince myself I was tired, overworked, imagining things. But the longer I watched, the more wrong it felt. My stomach tightened, my pulse spiked. The first sign something was off wasn't movement, it was stillness. The man didn't shift, didn't react to the flight attendants wheeling the cart by. Other passengers laughed, whispered, fumbled with their phones. He remained like a statue. Then I noticed subtle things. The rhythm of his breathing didn't match a human's. It was shallow, mechanical, and faintly deliberate. His fingers twitched just once, like a switch had flipped. I could have sworn I saw a faint pulse moving beneath his skin, like veins or wires. I tried to look away, tried to read my book, tried to distract myself with the drone of the engines, but I couldn't. My gaze kept snapping back to him. The air in the cabin began to feel thicker, heavier, as if something had moved in with him. By the halfway point of the flight, I could no longer ignore it. Something was wrong with the plane. Not with the engines or the wings of the turbulence, it was him. And then, perhaps worse, it wasn't just him. The flight attendants moving in perfect unison, heads tilted at the same angle, voices too smooth, too rehearsed. Passengers murmuring, their eyes hollow, their gestures slightly delayed like marionettes. I couldn't breathe, I couldn't move. The boundaries of reality started to blur. The hum of the engines became a low, droning chant, synchronized with the faint, irregular clicking sound from the aisle. And then it moved. I saw his head turn, just slightly, but it was enough. Enough for me to realize he had been aware of me the entire flight. His curve grew into a smile, not a normal smile, a slow, deliberate, widening grin that revealed too many teeth, sharp and glinting in the cabin light. And then his hands, they moved, not in the way of a human, not natural. They curled, stretched, and bent at angles no human bone should allow. Click, click, click. A rhythm, synchronized, precise. I tried to reach my phone to call someone, anyone, but the screen froze. Every button I pressed was unresponsive. The cabin was thick with dread. When I looked up, the flight attendant was suddenly standing next to me, her smile unnervingly wide, her posture precise, robotic. "Can I help you, sir?" Her voice was smooth, almost rehearsed, like a recording. I couldn't respond. Words were gone. The man across the aisle began to change. His figure twisted, elongating, stretching beyond the limits of human form. His skin seemed pallid, almost translucent. Veins or wires, I couldn't tell, ran beneath the surface like faint lightning. His eyes locked on mine. And in that moment, I knew he wasn't human. And neither were the others. The passengers, the attendants, all of them, all pieces of some incomprehensible puzzle, and I was the only piece that didn't fit. The turbulence increased, though the plane felt still. The cabin shook as if the laws of physics were bending. The hum of the engines deepened into a bass note that resonated in my chest. My breath quickened, my heart was hammering. I couldn't look away, I couldn't move, I was trapped in the mechanical gaze of something impossible. Then the lights flickered and died. Red emergency lights bathed the cabin in a hellish glow. Shadows elongated and crawled along the walls. My chest tightened. I felt weightless, as if the plane was floating between realities. The man's grin widened further. His body contorted impossibly, limbs bending in unnatural ways. Claws formed at his fingertips, gleaming in the dim light. The others moved in perfect unison, like puppets controlled by an invisible hand. No one blinked, no one spoke. The clicking sound intensified, echoing inside my head. I realized with a shudder that this flight wasn't bound by the normal rules of the world. Time, space, reality, it was all plastic here. Then came the whispers. Soft at first, faint, almost polite. Then louder, layered, insistent. The sound of 1,000 breaths overlapping, echoing. My name over and over. And in the middle of it, I heard words I didn't recognize, commands, promises, threats. I had to get away. I tried to move, tried to unbuckle my seatbelt. My limbs felt like lead, my voice wouldn't work. The man stepped closer, defying physics. His presence filled the entire aisle. He was everywhere. And then I saw it. His face wasn't a face anymore. It was a void. A black canvas with a grin that stretched beyond comprehension, eyes pale and blank. I realized with terror, this was not a being. This was a predator, a collector, a shapeshifter, and I was its prey. The rest of the flight is a blur. The cabin shifted constantly, seats elongated, walls compressed, the overhead bins curled inward like paper. The floor heaved. The other passengers, if they could be called that, surged toward me in perfect silent unison and froze again. And all the while, he watched. The man across the aisle, his grin growing wider, more grotesque with each passing moment. I thought I felt my very self fraying, my identity eroding under his gaze. My memories, my thoughts, my body, they didn't belong to me anymore. I blacked out. When I awoke, we were on the ground. The plane was parked at the gate, the engines had stopped. The lights were normal. The passengers had disembarked. The attendants were gone. Everything appeared ordinary, but I knew better. I remembered the grin, the impossibility of it, the unnatural way my pulse had synced with the cabin's rhythm. I stepped off the plane, and just for a moment I looked back. No one remained, but the sense of being watched lingered. Deep in my gut, I knew it wasn't over. It never would be. Because wherever he had been, wherever that entity had taken its form, it was still out there, waiting for the next flight, the next passenger, the next chance to feed. I never flew alone again. I never trusted shadows in a cabin, and I never looked at a perfect stranger the same way again. Because somewhere out there, the man across the aisle was still staring, still watching, still waiting. I thought stepping off the plane would end it, but it didn't. Not even close. The terminal looked normal. People moved around, luggage wheels clattering, the faint smell of coffee and fast food in the air, but I felt wrong, displaced. My chest still ached from the weight I'd carried in the cabin, and the memory of that man, the thing, was burned into my mind. I grabbed my bag and tried to focus on the mundane. Taxi lines, overhead announcements, the drone of fluorescent lights. Everything should have grounded me, reminded me I was back in the real world, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being followed. And I was. I noticed him first at the luggage carousel. Not the exact man from the plane, he couldn't have been, but the same presence. Pale skin, too perfect posture, eyes like chalk, watching me, waiting. The way he moved, just the faintest delay between each step, like a broken clock. I froze. My bag slipped from my hand. A crowd surged around me, but no one seemed to notice, and yet he did. He smiled, that same impossible, grotesque grin. I ran. Outside, the city felt safer. People, cars, neon signs, flashing advertisements. Normal life. But the man, or whatever he was still behind me. Not chasing, not running, just there. In the corner of my vision, always at the perfect distance. A predator that didn't need to move. I tried to enter my hotel, but the doors wouldn't let me pass smoothly. A subtle resistance, as if the world itself had thickened around me. I slammed into it, and it resisted, nudging me back toward the streets. That's when I realized he wasn't confined to the plane. He had left it. Somehow, somewhere he had bridged the boundaries of reality. I called the police. I reported a suspicious man, my voice quivering, explaining his pale skin, the lack of blinking, the unnatural grin. 2 officers arrived 30 minutes later. I led them outside. The streets were empty. No trace of him. Nothing. They assumed I was exaggerating. I didn't blame them. Who would believe a man who claimed a passenger could bend reality, who seemed almost like a ghost? But I knew. I could feel it in my bones. He was still out there. The next few days were a blur. Sleep came in fits, haunted by impossible landscapes. A cabin suspended in clouds, passengers frozen mid-laugh, my reflection in the window across the aisle distorted, smiling back at me with teeth too sharp, eyes too pale. Every time I closed my eyes, I could see him. Every time I moved, I felt his presence. And then the letters started arriving. Plain envelopes, no return address, just my name scrawled in neat, angular handwriting. Inside, a single piece of paper with a drawing, a seat on a plane, a figure sitting across the aisle, the smile stretched impossibly wide. No words, just the drawing. And in the next envelope contained a message: "You can't leave it behind." I tried to escape. Flights, trains, buses. Every time I boarded a plane, no matter the airline, the destination, the seat, he was there. Always across the aisle, always staring, always grinning. And I started noticing the pattern. He wasn't random. He wasn't choosing me by chance. He was waiting for me. He followed me through every flight, every form of transportation, every moment I tried to feel normal. I started canceling trips, avoiding airports, limiting travel altogether. But it became clear, he didn't need the plane. He only needed me. I needed answers. I researched obsessively, looking for flights, passengers, disappearances, anything that resembled my experience. There were a few threads, scattered across forums and obscure reports, passengers vanishing, reports of strange figures on planes, attendants behaving unnaturally, flights that landed with no one remembering turbulence. Most had been dismissed as anomalies, but together they painted a horrifying picture. And in every report, there was a single recurring description: the man across the aisle. It wasn't just a man, it was a collector, a watcher, a predator that fed on fear, control, and attention. The closer you stared, the more it consumed, and somehow it had a way of breaking reality's rules, bending physics, freezing passengers in space-time, and stretching its grin across dimensions. I realized too late what it wanted. It wanted acknowledgement, recognition, fear. And the moment you saw it properly, really saw it, you became part of its realm. You entered a shared space where time bent, where the laws of the world no longer applied. That flight was my initiation, my exposure, and now it was following me. The final straw came when I returned home to my apartment. I thought my own bed, my own walls would protect me. I locked the door, checked the windows, triple-checked every corner. I tried to convince myself it was over. Then, I saw him in my reflection. Not in a window, not on a screen, in the mirror. My own bathroom mirror. He wasn't behind me. He wasn't in the room. He was inside the reflection, smiling, tilting his head, mimicking me perfectly but wrong. His grin stretched impossibly wide, eyes too pale, skin too flawless. I could feel him there. Not in the room, not outside, but somehow inside me. Panic set in. I threw the mirror. Glass shattered. The reflection vanished. I thought I had won. Relief washed over me, but it was temporary. That night, I awoke in darkness. The bed was empty. My apartment felt wrong, the air thick. And there, standing at the foot of my bed, was the figure again, across the aisle. Except there was no aisle, no plane, just him, staring, waiting, smiling. And that's when I realized the truth. It didn't need the plane, the aisle, the cabin. It only needed me, and I had invited it in the moment I noticed it, the moment I stared. Days blurred into weeks. Sleep was fragmented. Every mirror, every reflection, every polished surface became a window into its presence. I tried distractions, work, travel, isolation. Nothing mattered. It always found a way to remind me it was there, watching, feeding, patient, and the grin. Always the grin. I began keeping a journal detailing every encounter,
every twitch, every mechanical motion. I documented flights, trains, buses. Every time I thought I had escaped, it was there again, across the aisle, smiling. I realized that acknowledging it, noticing it, even thinking about it gave it power. And now it was more than a passenger. It was a constant, a presence in my reality. Then came the breakthrough, though it was terrifying. I discovered a pattern. The thing could be ignored, not by avoiding sight, but by refusing fear, by observing neutrally, without emotional reaction, without panic. The moment you screamed, flinched, or acknowledged the horror, it drew closer. But if you saw it with detachment, like an object rather than a predator, it seemed to hesitate. I tested it. At first, I stared at my own reflection, willing myself not to react. The grin stretched, widened, and then paused. The movement slowed. The air shifted. It retreated. And for the first time, I felt some control. Not safety, not escape, but control. I learned to live with it. Flights became exercises of discipline. I kept my mind focused, my gaze neutral, my pulse calm. The man across the aisle, the figure in reflections, the impossible grinning predator remained, but it stopped consuming me. It waits, always waits, for others, for anyone who notices, for anyone who reacts. And now I know it is not just a passenger across the aisle. It is the observer of fear itself, a collector of attention and terror. I don't know where it came from. I don't know why it exists, and I know I will never be free of the knowledge that it is always there, beyond perception, beyond reason. And I have learned a final, bitter truth. Once you see it, truly see it, part of you is never the same again. So if you ever board a plane, look out across the aisle. Be careful who you notice, because if they stare back with a grin that doesn't belong, it's already too late. And somewhere, far beyond the clouds, the collector waits for its next passenger.
It began on a rain-choked morning in Prague, the kind of day when the sun refuses to rise and the clouds press down like a heavy lid. My name is Gabriel Novak, and I was a rare book dealer, or at least I used to be, before I found the book that changed everything. I had been hunting rare, forbidden tomes for years, but nothing had prepared me for this. The trail led me to a crumbling back alley in the old city, a place few noticed and fewer dared enter. A faint smell of damp wood and mildew hung in the air. The shop I found was barely standing, its windows caked in dust and grime, and the wooden sign above the door was warped and faded. Only a spiral burned into the wood marked it. It spun clockwise, or at least it seemed to, when the dim light caught it just right. Inside, the air was heavy. Dust motes floated in the faint light, moving like tiny dancers in a forgotten theater. Behind the counter sat an old man, hunched over, his skin mottled like parchment, his eyes cloudy and unblinking. He said nothing. He didn't even move. He simply gestured toward a door at the back of the shop. Something compelled me forward. I shouldn't have gone, but I did. The stairs beyond the door spiraled downwards endlessly, deeper than any basement should go. My steps echoed off the stone walls, hollow and depressive. And then I saw it. The book. It sat atop a pedestal of what I first thought was bone, bound in rusted chains. The leather cover was dark, stitched rather than glued, and it seemed to breathe. No title, just a spiral etched on the front, identical to the one outside. My fingers trembled as I reached for it. The moment I touched the cover, a cold shot up my spine, like plunging into an icy river. The lights dimmed, the air thickened, and I heard voices, not outside, but within my head.
layered, overlapping whispers, pleading, screaming, chanting. I staggered back, but it was too late. The book had noticed me. It opened on its own. Pages flipped frantically, stopping on a rust-red inscription that glowed faintly in the darkness. Speak the name, and a soul is claimed. Beneath it, a single name was repeated over and over. Alistar. I should have run. I should have left it. But something drew me in. The way the pages pulsed, the faint thrum like a heartbeat called to me. I didn't leave. I woke up later in my hotel room, the book lying on my chest. No chains, no pedestal, just its weight, pressing down like a living thing. That night, the dreams began. Shadows twisting through fog, whispering my name. People I didn't know appeared, pleading with me to destroy the book, to bury it, to stop reading. Their faces twisted in agony, halfway between screaming and melting. Each morning I woke drenched in sweat, with bloodstains on my sheets. Not mine, never mine. I tried to rid myself of it. I left it on trains, threw it into rivers, buried it beneath old church grounds. But each time I returned home, there it was, on the table, in my hands, waiting. I wasn't losing my mind. I was losing something far worse, my freedom. Desperate, I contacted Professor Lena Vorel, an expert in ancient and occult languages. She agreed to meet, though her face went pale the moment she saw the book. "This is older than any language known," she whispered. "A corrupted form of Enochian, inverted and twisted." When she translated the first page, the room went dark. The windows rattled as though the air itself had become liquid. And then it came. Something entered the space, not human, not visible, but present, pressing down on us, heavy and suffocating. Lena screamed, but it wasn't her voice. It came from somewhere else, from the book itself. A soul had been claimed. When it was over, Lena's body collapsed, warm, lifeless, and on the open page of the book, her name had appeared, inscribed in rust-red ink. Beside it, her photograph burned slowly into the page. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. I had watched her die, and the book had given me no choice. I understood then that this was not just a tome of knowledge. It was a ledger, a contract, a shop of souls. Each name spoken aloud from the book granted the reader something: power, fame, health, knowledge. But the cost was clear. The soul of another, claimed and bound, feeding a force older than the world itself. Alistar, the name I had seen repeated, was the collector, the merchant of essence, and the book was his shop. I tried to burn it. Water, fire, acid, all failed. The book only hissed, resisting destruction. It was alive, aware, hungry. And I realized it had chosen me. Every temptation, every soul it claimed was a test. The cult of the drowned saint was my last hope. I heard whispers of them for years, opponents of soul binding, enemies of Alistar. They agreed to help, but at a cost. I had to take the book to the spiritual threshold in a cathedral buried deep beneath the Swiss Alps. Only there could the ritual unbind it. And I had to resist its temptations every step of the way. Every step was torture. The book whispered constantly, offering the impossible: bring back my dead father, cure hidden illnesses, grant immortality. It tempted me to speak a name, any name, to trade a life for my deepest desire. Each temptation threatened to undo me, but the cult insisted: speak nothing, resist everything, or all is lost. At the cathedral, the ritual began. The air thickened, shadows danced across stone walls, and the book screamed, not in words but in sound, a grinding, metallic, tortured cry that made my bones ache. And then Alistar appeared. Not a demon, not a monstrous creature, a man, pale, almost glowing white, golden eyes, black robes stitched with names, names of those the book had claimed. His presence filled the cathedral, immense and impossible. He smiled, beautiful, terrible, full of promise and danger. "Take it," he said, voice like velvet over steel. "Take the book, and everything you have ever desired is yours. refuse, and your eternity will be a void. The cult pleaded with me to resist. My fingers trembled, my mind reeled. I knew the cost of a single spoken name. I understood what would happen. And yet, I spoke. I spoke my own name. The book locked shut immediately. The spiral on the cover vanished. Alistar screamed, not in triumph, but in rage. I had done the unthinkable. I bound myself into the book. My soul became the final seal, a loophole to stop the collector. The cult said it was over, that countless lives were saved. But I didn't feel relief. I was trapped, still aware, still present within the pages. Every time someone touches the book, I feel it. I whisper warnings, but few listen. And now, here I am, telling you this. If you ever find the book, do not read it. Do not speak the names. Do not listen to the voice offering your deepest wish. Because no price, no desire is worth what the book demands. I am still here, watching, waiting. And if you hear this, it may already be too late.
The weight of the book on my chest was nothing compared to the burden inside my mind. Every time I blinked, I felt the echoes of the souls it had claimed brushing against my thoughts. Faces I had never seen, voices I could barely comprehend, whispered fragments of promises, warnings, and pleas. Each night, the dreams grew more vivid. I could feel their hunger, the slow pull of the book trying to extend its influence through me, and I knew it wasn't finished. It never would be. I had thought that speaking my own name, the loophole I had carved, was the end, but the book doesn't forgive. It doesn't forget. It waits. In the days after the ritual in the cathedral, I found myself unable to sleep in my own apartment. Even the smallest shadow seemed to pulse with intent. Mirrors reflected more than just my image. Sometimes I swore I glimpsed someone else standing just behind me, too quick to focus, too deliberate to be imagined. It was the kind of paranoia that eats away at your bones. I began to notice small, subtle changes in myself. My reflection lagged, just slightly, a fraction of a second, like a delayed echo. My voice occasionally cracked, shifting into tones that weren't mine. My dreams became places the book wanted me to go, corridors lined with doors that opened to rooms filled with faces and names I did not recognize. And always I could hear the faint whisper of Alistar, calling, coaxing, testing. Weeks passed, and then months. I attempted to return to normal life, but normal no longer applied. My shop remained empty. The rare books I once sold felt lifeless. Clients stopped calling, drawn away by other dealers who did not understand the danger that lurked in the shadows of the volumes I had once handled. But the book never left me. It didn't need to. Its presence was stitched into my being. I tried to speak to Professor Lena Vorel's colleagues, occultists I knew from conferences in Vienna and Prague. Some laughed nervously when I described the book's actions. Others refused to acknowledge me at all. I realized then that the book's reach was wider than I imagined. The collectors, the scholars, anyone with enough curiosity to seek it out, they were all potential prey, and I had become its reluctant guardian, chained not by iron, but by knowledge. It was during a stormy night in early December that I truly understood the final layer of the book's cruelty. I had been tracing a name it had whispered to me, one of the countless souls bound by Alistar over the centuries. The room around me seemed to shrink, the shadows gathering like living ink. I felt a pressure against my skull, a weight pressing down from somewhere beyond the ceiling, as if the book was inhaling, testing me. And then it spoke. Not in words, not in whispers, but in visions. I saw the moment each soul had been claimed, the fear, the confusion, the slow realization of inevitability. Each one screamed silently, trapped in a moment I could almost touch. And then, chillingly, I saw myself, lying in a circle of blood and flame in a cathedral I hadn't yet visited, speaking my own name. The book showed me my choice as both a memory and a prophecy. It wasn't finished. It never would be.
My victory was temporary, my life temporary. My mind was its new ledger, and every thought I had now belonged to it. The next day, I decided to act. I needed a plan, a way to sever the link entirely. I returned to the cathedral in the Alps, the place where the cult of the drowned saint had performed the ritual. The air was stale and freezing, but the memories of that day, the chants, the shadows, Alistar himself were vivid in my mind. I had been told the cathedral contained gateways, thresholds to spiritual planes. Perhaps if I could take the book back there, I could isolate its power, maybe even end it. But as I approached the altar, the book acted before I could. It leapt from my hands, landing on the cold stone floor with an unnatural grace. Pages flipped open to names I had never spoken, never even read aloud. The air shimmered with energy. Shadows crawled along the walls, black smoke thickening and twisting into shapes that made my skin crawl. And then I saw him, Alistar, standing behind the altar. He wasn't monstrous, not in the traditional sense. He was flawless, pale as marble, eyes golden, robes stitched with the names of countless souls. He smiled, not the simple smile of a man, but one that contained centuries of cruelty and cunning. "You think you have defeated me," he said, voice smooth as silk, "but you are still part of me. The book's power is not in the chains, it is in the knowing." I could barely respond. The cathedral shook, shadows coiling around my feet like serpents. My breath caught in my throat. The book pulsed, an almost visible heartbeat. I realized then that the ritual I had completed before was not a conclusion, it was a tether. I had bound myself to the book, yes, but it had bound me further in ways I could not yet see. I had to think. I had to act. I remembered Lena's notes, the cult's instructions. There was a ritual more dangerous than any I had attempted, one that could sever the link between a human and a soul-bound tome, but it required blood and fire and the willing sacrifice of the person attempting it. In other words, I had to risk everything. I drew a circle on the cold cathedral floor, using my own blood, ancient symbols traced from the notes I had taken from Lena and the cult. The book reacted immediately, flipping pages violently, images of faces screaming in red ink as if the paper itself were bleeding. Alistar's figure blurred, then solidified, moving closer. He didn't touch me, but I could feel his presence pressing down like a tidal wave. "Do you think you can contain me?" he asked. His voice was everywhere. "Do you think your mortality can outmatch eternity?" I began the incantation, words I barely understood, pulled from forgotten languages older than the church itself. My voice cracked, my throat burned, but I continued over and over. Flames from the altar ignited without fuel, spiraling into the center of the circle. The book writhed, thrashing as if alive, pages tearing themselves apart and reassembling mid-air. Alistar's grin widened. I was terrified. I wanted to flee, but I could not. My soul was at stake. My mind screamed at me to stop, but my will refused. I repeated the final line, the words that would either free me or destroy me entirely. The moment I spoke them, everything shifted. The cathedral exploded with light and shadow simultaneously, the walls groaning and cracking. The book flew into the air, spinning like a vortex of pure blackness. Faces pressed against its covers, screaming, begging, thrashing. I felt every one of them, and I felt myself. Then, silence. The book was still. The shadows had retreated. Alistar's figure dissolved into nothing, leaving only a faint golden glow that faded within seconds. My body collapsed, trembling, drenched in sweat and blood. The circle on the floor was scorched, the symbols still faintly glowing. I had done it. I had severed the tether. For now. But as I lay there, gasping for air, I realized something horrifying. The book had not been destroyed. It had returned to its dormant state, resting in silence, waiting for the next hand, the next curiosity, the next person foolish enough to touch it. And worse, I could still feel it. a faint heartbeat in my chest, a whisper at the edge of thought, reminding me that while I survived, the book's influence lingered, embedded within me. I returned to Prague, leaving the cathedral behind. The streets felt colder, emptier, as though the city itself knew the horrors I survived. I went back to my small apartment, but I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the building, every shifting shadow reminded me of what I touched, what I survived, and what I failed to destroy completely. Over time, I learned to live with it. I never spoke the book's name again. I never touched another rare book, no matter how tempting. I buried the memories in layers of routine and work, but they never truly left. Occasionally, when alone, I would feel a whisper in my mind, a name being written somewhere, a soul being claimed, and I would know with icy certainty that the book was still out there, somewhere, waiting. I have tried to warn others. Rarely someone listens. Most dismiss it as paranoia, a story for thrill seekers. But I know the truth. Curiosity is not the danger. The danger is the book itself. It waits, patient, cunning, eternal. And if you ever find it, if it ever calls your name, remember this: no knowledge, no power, no desire is worth the price it demands. Because once you touch it, it touches you back forever.
I had never been a believer in curses or dark magic, not seriously at least. That changed the day I found the book in my great-aunt's attic, hidden beneath a pile of moth-eaten blankets and forgotten trunks. My name is Adrian Kerr, and I had only returned to my family home in Blackwood, Vermont, after my great-aunt's mysterious passing. They said she'd suffered a stroke, her frail body found twisted and contorted on the floor. But when I saw her in the coffin, I noticed her eyes, wide open, frozen in terror, and I knew there was something more. The house smelled of decay and age, a sharp mix of dried flowers and mothballs. Every step I took on the creaking floorboards seemed to echo too loudly, as if the house itself was listening. Dust hung thick in the air, swirling around the dim light filtering through the grimy windows. I had planned to stay only a few days to sort through her belongings, but what I found in that attic made me question everything I thought I knew about the world. Behind a false wall panel, I discovered a book bound in black leather, cracked and worn with age, yet pulsing faintly with an unearthly warmth. Its cover had an intricate pattern of thorned vines etched in dark, glossy ink that seemed to shimmer when the light caught it. The title was etched in jagged script, The Grimoire of Thorns. I should have left it there. I should have turned and walked away. But curiosity, that insidious lure, had me reaching out. The moment my fingers brushed the cover, a shiver ran up my spine, cold and sharp. The attic's temperature dropped instantly, and the air thickened, making it hard to breathe. A low hum seemed to emanate from the book itself, and for a fleeting moment I thought I heard whispers, soft, layered, and urgent, as if hundreds of voices were vying for attention inside my skull. I hesitated, but then the book opened on its own, the pages flipping like a living thing, stopping at a page that made my stomach tighten. There were 13 spells listed, each more unsettling than the last. The drawings were grotesque and precise, strange symbols drawn with a trembling hand, accompanied by instructions written in Latin and what I later realized was a corrupted, inverted form of Enochian. Some pages bore stains, dark, rusty, perhaps dried blood. And then I found it, the 13th spell. No title, only a warning. Do not speak these words unless you are prepared to see your soul divided. Once cast, the bond is permanent. I laughed nervously, trying to dismiss it as a theatrical prank or an obscure ritual meant for show, but something deep inside me ached to know what would happen if I spoke it aloud. That night, the attic felt different.
Shadows lengthened unnaturally, stretching along the rafters and walls as though aware of my hesitation. The clock struck 3:13 a.m., a time that seemed to pulse with significance, and my hands moved before my mind did. I was walking to the book, lips parting, words spilling out I didn't remember rehearsing. The incantation scraped my throat, foreign and jagged, each syllable making the hairs on my arms stand on end. The attic went still, the only sound the rasp of my breath and the faint crackling of the shadows. And then I saw it. My own reflection, standing perfectly still at the far end of the attic, mirrored my every movement, but it was wrong. Its eyes were dark, hollow, soulless, and its smile stretched too wide, too sharp. It didn't speak, but the malice it radiated was undeniable. I backed away, but it mirrored me, delayed by a heartbeat, a second, an eternity. It didn't matter. The double had been called forth, and I had no idea how to stop it. I tried to run, but the attic door slammed shut of its own volition. I was trapped with it. Every instinct screamed at me to flee, to destroy the book, to destroy the mirror version of myself. But nothing worked. It was patient. It studied me. And then it spoke. "You called me. Now I am free." I screamed, my voice swallowed by the sudden darkness that thickened in the attic. I remember feeling its essence pressing against mine, trying to overwrite, to consume. And then, nothing. I woke the next morning on the attic floor. The book was gone. My double, gone. I told myself it had been a nightmare, but the evidence was everywhere. I'd glance into a mirror and catch a flicker, my face delayed, moving seconds after I did. I'd hear a whisper in the hallways of the house, echoing in a voice that wasn't mine. I found myself waking in the backyard or on the kitchen floor with a knife in my hand with no memory of moving it there. The house itself seemed complicit, every creak, every groan, every shadow suggesting it knew more than it should. Over the next several days, I scoured old books and journals left by my great-aunt. I learned that she had been a member of a cult that worshipped and studied entities capable of manipulating souls. The Grimoire of Thorns had been passed down through her family, carefully hidden, and she had been using it to keep something at bay, something that wanted out. Each page, each spell was a safeguard, a prison, or a weapon, and I had dismantled it with a single recitation. The cult's writings hinted at a way to reverse the 13th spell, but it was not simple. It required recreating the binding circle, using blood from the host, the person who cast the spell, and fire from a consecrated candle. The final choice, the writings warned, was brutal: merge with the mirror entity or destroy it entirely. Either option carried a risk of permanent loss of self, of erasure, of death in both body and soul. I had 10 days before the spell's final stage would cement. Each passing night, the double's influence grew stronger. My reflection lagged more. My thoughts were not entirely my own. I began hearing voices whispering through the walls, the floor, the air itself, instructing, tempting, mocking. I could feel myself being rewritten in subtle ways. I had to act, and I had to act quickly. The first step was locating the remnants of the book. Despite my previous attempts to distance myself from it, I knew it had not left me entirely. I searched the house, the attic, the basement, and even the hidden crawl spaces beneath the floorboards. Eventually, I found a small journal tucked behind loose floorboards. It had belonged to my great-aunt. Her handwriting was shaky but desperate, recounting her own encounters with the mirror being and the same struggle I now faced. She had resisted. She had fought to maintain her identity using a ritual she had learned from the cult. Her instructions were clear but terrifying. I needed to recreate the circle, draw it with blood, summon fire, and face the entity directly. Time was against me. I gathered what I needed: a rusted nail to draw blood, candles from the church across the street, and the courage I could muster. I had no way to know if it would work, only that it was my last chance. The night arrived. Shadows thickened, crawling along the walls like living things. I drew the circle, painted symbols in my blood, and sat at its center. The air grew colder, heavier, almost suffocating. From the corner of the attic, it emerged. My double, sharper, more vivid than ever, its grin wider and more malicious. "I am stronger now," it said, voice perfectly mimicking mine, but layered with cruelty. "You gave me a body. You gave me a voice. Soon I will be all that is left." I began the incantation, words I had memorized, repeating over and over until the shadows thickened into a vortex, pulling at my senses. Flames from the candle roared higher than they should have. The double writhed, its body glitching, flickering, as though reality itself struggled to contain it. Pain ripped through me, simultaneous tearing and stitching, as if my soul and its essence were being forced together. I whispered a final spell, one of unity rather than separation, hoping to contain the entity within myself, to reclaim my identity fully. Hours passed like minutes, and then nothing. Silence, exhaustion, relief that was tempered with lingering dread. The circle was burned into the floor, shadows receded, and the attic returned to its quiet state. My double was gone, but I knew better to feel safe. The spell did not end the darkness. It did not destroy it. The grimoire of thorns was still out there, waiting for the next curious hand. And sometimes I still hear it, in mirrors, in shadows, in the edges of my dreams. Sometimes my reflection moves a fraction of a second too late. Sometimes I hear whispers that are not mine, coaxing, tempting. The curse lives on, the entity waits. And if you ever come across a book bound in black leather, pulsing with unnatural warmth, do not touch it. Do not speak its words, because once it calls you, once it touches your mind, it never truly leaves. And even now, as I write this, I can feel it watching, waiting, somewhere just out of reach, knowing that curiosity is the most dangerous thing of all.
The days after the ritual blurred together. I thought I had contained it, but a shadow of my double lingered, always just at the corner of perception. Mirrors hesitated to reflect me fully, shadows clung to surfaces longer than they should, and the whispers never stopped. Every creak of the floorboards, every sigh of the wind against the house carried a memory of it. My double, watching, waiting, always patient. I had survived, but survival felt like a cage. I tried to resume my life. Work, errands, normal interactions with the few neighbors I had in Blackwood. But the house had changed me. People would glance at me, pause mid-step, then shake their heads as if dismissing a fleeting thought. My voice had a flat, emotionless quality I could not entirely shake, and sometimes strangers stared at me too long, their eyes wide with unspoken recognition. I felt like a man caught halfway between my own life and the other existence the book had conjured. Then, one evening, the whispers returned, louder and more insistent. Not in the shadows this time, not behind walls, but inside my head. They spoke my name, Adrian, clear and deliberate, with a cadence that made my blood run cold. I tried to block it out, tried to tell myself it was the lingering effects of stress and fear, but the whispers grew impatient, almost angry, as though the entity was testing me, probing for weakness. I understood then. Containment was only temporary. The grimoire of thorns was not finished.
The book did not simply exist, it sought new hosts, new hands to touch, new minds to manipulate. And somehow it knew I had survived. Somehow it knew my location. A week later, a package arrived at my door. No return address. Inside was a single envelope sealed with a black wax stamp I did not recognize. I hesitated, but curiosity, or perhaps inevitability, forced my fingers to break the seal. Inside, there was only a single card. Written in jagged crimson ink were 3 words: "It begins anew." I dropped the card. The air thickened immediately. Shadows in the corners of the room stretched, forming shapes that almost resembled hands, fingers trying to reach me from thin air. A cold, unnatural wind swept through the house, despite every window being closed. And then I saw it. Reflected in the polished surface of the darkened fireplace, my double, no longer just a shadow, but more defined, more real than ever, stood behind me, grinning with the same hollow eyes and too wide smile. I spun around. Nothing. Just the room. Silence. Relief only lasted a heartbeat. I glanced back at the reflection. It had moved closer, tilting its head in a mocking imitation of my own curiosity. I stumbled back, my hands pressing against my chest as the whispers escalated, overlapping voices, pleading and threatening simultaneously. My mind felt like it was being squeezed, compressed into a single point of panic. I realized I had no choice but to return to the source, the grimoire of thorns. If it was summoning my double again, it had to be calling from the book itself. But where was it now? I had buried it, or thought I had, deep beneath the floorboards during the ritual. I spent hours searching, tearing apart the attic, the crawl spaces, and even the cellar. Eventually, beneath a loose floorboard in the study, my fingers brushed something familiar. The book lay there, untouched, pulsing faintly, the thorned design on its cover writhing as though alive. It hadn't left. It had been waiting for me. I picked it up carefully, each movement accompanied by a growing sense of dread. The grimoire was heavy in my hands, but not in weight. Something about it pressed on my soul, tugging, pulling, urging me to open it. I forced my eyes to resist its pull. The whispers escalated, now frantic, almost pleading. Read, name, speak, power. I did not want to, but I also knew I could not ignore it. The book demanded attention. I carried it to the attic, to the remnants of the ritual circle. Flames from the burned candles still smoldered faintly in the charred grooves of the floor. I sought within the circle again, gripping the book like a lifeline, trying to steel myself against what was to come. I opened it. The pages flipped violently on their own, landing on the 13th spell. My double emerged from the shadows once more, now fully corporeal, stretching and twisting unnaturally, as if reality itself bent to accommodate it. Its voice was mine, but sharper, more mocking. "You cannot resist me forever." I had no choice. The only way to end it, to finally sever the bond, was to finish what my great aunt had started. I began the incantation again, using my own blood to trace the symbols in the circle, speaking slowly, deliberately, aware that each word could summon or banish, merge or destroy. The double lunged at me, its movements glitching, jerking unnaturally as it mimicked my own gestures, but out of sync, always a fraction too late. Pain tore through me as I pushed forward. My own identity strained under the pressure of the entity, and for a moment I feared I would be erased entirely. The air in the attic became thick, almost liquid, pressing against my chest and forcing me to my knees. I could feel the grimoire pulsing in my hands, alive, hungry, seeking a name. I resisted, keeping my mind focused, repeating the ritual over and over. The double shrieked, a sound impossible for any human throat, twisting, writhing, but unable to break the circle. Then came the final moment, the unification spell. Not separation, not destruction, but reintegration. I whispered it, softly, every syllable a knife cutting through the fabric of the entity's existence. Pain exploded through me, a tearing and mending, as if I were being disassembled and rebuilt from the inside out. My double screamed, writhing, glitching, the shadows around it collapsing in on themselves like ink in water. The grimoire fell silent. The whispers vanished. The shadows receded. My double, gone. For a while, it was over. The house felt empty, still, ordinary once again. Mirrors reflected my movements correctly. Shadows behaved as they should. I felt myself returning to myself, whole though scarred, cautious, aware of what I had endured. I could leave the attic without fear, walk through the house without checking behind every corner. I had survived. But the grimoire, it remained. I could not destroy it. Fire, acid, water, all failed. It pulsed faintly on the shelf where I had placed it, reminding me that it still existed, still waited for the curious. I resolved to hide it, bury it in a place where no one would find it for centuries. I carved a stone-lined box reinforced with iron and buried the book deep in the forest behind the property, marking the spot with nothing but a small, nondescript rock. Even then, I could feel it, a pull, faint but persistent in the deepest part of my mind, a reminder that curiosity is dangerous, that the unknown is patient, and that some forces cannot be eradicated, only contained. Weeks later, I tried to resume normal life. I visited neighbors, ran errands, and even attempted to enjoy small comforts, a cup of coffee in the morning, a walk through the woods. But I noticed the smallest things unsettling me. Reflections lingered too long. Shadows seemed too thick. Sometimes I caught glimpses of something moving just behind my peripheral vision. A flicker of movement, a whisper I could not place. And always, in the quiet of the night, the attic pulsed faintly, as though it remembered. I had survived, yes. I had contained the entity, returned it to its prison, and lived. But the grimoire of thorns had taught me one thing more terrifying than death. Survival is not freedom. Some darknesses never leave. Some curses are not meant to be broken. They are meant to remind you that curiosity has a price. If you ever come across a book bound in black leather, pulsing faintly as if breathing, do not touch it. Do not open it. Do not speak its words. Because once you summon what lies within, it may leave your sight, but it will never leave you. It will wait, it will watch, and one day it will call your name. Sometimes in the quiet, I can hear it now, faint as a whisper, almost a sigh, coming from deep in the forest where I buried it. Adrian, you are not done yet. I do not answer. I do not move. I have learned that the only way to survive is to remain still, patient, and aware. To wait, to remember, to never ever give in to curiosity again. The darkness waits, always. And so do I.